The Amur Annexation refers to the incorporation of the southeast corner of Siberia into Russia in 1858–60. The two areas involved of the Priamurye, between the Amur River and the Stanovoy Range to the north, and the Primorye, which runs down the coast from the Amur mouth to the Korean border and does not include Sakhalin Island. The territory of Outer Manchuria was formerly under the control of the Qing dynasty. In the modern-day geography of Russia, Priamurye roughly corresponds to the Amur Oblast and the southern half of the Khabarovsk Krai, while Primorye corresponds to the Primorsky Krai. Background: hydrologically, the Stanovoy Mountains separate the rivers that flow north into the Arctic from those that flow south into the Amur River. Ecologically, the area is the southeastern edge of the Siberian boreal forest, with some areas good for agriculture along the middle Amur. Socially and politically, from about 600 AD, it was the northern fringe of the Chinese-Korean Manchu world. For a Chinese view of this, see Outer Manchuria and Sakhalin. In 1643, Russian adventurers spilled over the Stanovoys, but by 1689 they were driven back by the Manchus. For this, see Sino-Russian border conflicts. By the Treaty of Nerchinsk, the two empires recognized the Stanovoys and the Argon River as the border. This remained stable until the 1840s. Following the voyages of Captain James Cook, significant numbers of British, French and American vessels began entering the Pacific. They were followed by Russians like Grigory Shelokov and Nikolai Rezanov, who were mainly concerned with the new Russian colonies in Alaska. This raised the problem of naval defense of the east coast of Siberia and the possibility of using the Amur River as a supply route to the Pacific. Muravyov and the Treaty of Agon. In 1845, Alexander von Middendorf entered the Amur country and wrote a report. In 1847, Alexander Gavrilov reached the mouth of the Amur but could not find a deep water entrance. In 1848, Gennady Nevelskoy was sent in the Baikal to explore the Pacific coast. In 1849, he sailed part way up the Amur and then sailed south through the Tartar Strait, thereby proving that Sakhalin was an island, a fact that was kept a military secret. In 1850, he founded Nikolaevsk on Amur on what was alleged Chinese territory. Karl Nesselrode, the foreign minister, tried to overrule this, but Nicholas I declared that where once the Russian flag is raised, it must not be lowered. In the next 3 years, Nevelskoy established other forts on the alleged Chinese territory around the mouth of the Amur. In 1847, Nikolai Muravyov was appointed Governor-General of East Siberia. Before leaving for Irkutsk, he arranged for the creation of an Amur committee to coordinate work in the area. In 1849, he made an overland trip to Okhotsk and then to Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. One result of this was the removal of the main naval center from Okhotsk to Petropavlovsk. To give himself a military force, he created a new Cossack host, the Transbaikalian Cossacks, by arming 20,000 mining serfs. In May to June 1854, he and 1,000 men sailed down the Amur to Nikolaevsk. The Manchu governor at Agon had no choice but to let them pass. News of the Crimean War reached the Far East in July. In September, an Anglo-French naval force was defeated at the siege of Petropavlovsk. Judging that Petropavlovsk could not be defended, Muravyov ordered Rear Admiral Vasily Zavoyko to move his forces to the Amur area. In May 1855, Charles Elliott's force found Zavoyko at Castry Bay. Under cover of fog, Zavoyko withdrew north to the mouth of the Amur, which baffled the British since they thought that Sakhalin was connected to the mainland. In 1855, Muravyov sent a 3,000-man force down the Amur, including settlers. The Chinese declared this to be illegal, but did nothing. Also, in 1855 Russia and Japan signed the Treaty of Shimoda, which temporarily resolved the conflict in Sakhalin and the Kuril Islands. The Russian representative was Admiral Putyutin. The Second Opium War broke out in 1856. By 1858 the British and French had captured Canton. When news of this reached St. Petersburg, the foreign minister Alexander Gorchakov, who had replaced Nesselrode, decided that it was time to activate Russian Far Eastern policy. Muravyov was given plenipotentiary powers and Admiral Yevgeny Putyutin was sent to Peking to negotiate a more favorable relation. In 1856 and 1857 Muravyov sent more settlers down the Amur. In 1858 he went himself. His instructions were not to use force except to rescue captives. On reaching Aegon he presented the local governor with a treaty, which was signed. This Treaty of Aegon basically assigned all the land north of the Amur to Russia and declared the area east of the Ushuri River and south of the Amur to be a Russo-Chinese condominium until further negotiations. Muravyov continued down the Amur and founded Khabarovsk at the mouth of the Ushuri. Next September, Alexander II promoted him to full general and granted him the suffix Amursky. In 1859 he sent an exploring expedition down the coast as far as Vladivostok. Putyutin, Ignatiev and the Convention of Peking. Meanwhile, Admiral Yevgeny Putyutin was traveling overland to China. Reaching Kyakhta, he was refused entry, so he sailed down the Amur and took ship to Shenzhen. Refused entry again, he joined the British and French at Shanghai. When the Allies took the Taku forts, Putyutin offered himself as a mediator. The result was the treaties of Shenzhen, which granted most of the Allied demands. Without fully informing the Allies, Putyutin made a separate deal with the Chinese. In return for cannon, 20,000 rifles and military instructors, the frontier would be adjusted in some unspecified way. After the Allies withdrew, the Chinese failed to implement the treaties. The Allies returned in June 1859, attempted to retake the Taku forts and failed. As a result, the Chinese refused to ratify the treaties. At this point, a 27-year-old major general named Nikolai Pavlovich Ignatiev entered the picture. In March 1859 he was assigned to accompany the Russian weapons and instructors. At the frontier he found that the Chinese had rejected the treaties and would not accept the weapons. He continued to Peking, where he stayed at the Russian ecclesiastical mission and attempted to negotiate with the Manchus. Hearing of Allied preparations, he joined the British and French in Shanghai and proved to be most helpful to the Allied councils. By October 1860 the British and French had retaken the Taku forts and entered Peking, and the Emperor had fled to Johor. Ignatiev now placed himself as an intermediary between the Europeans and Chinese. By the first two treaties of Peking, nearly all the Allied demands were met. Ignatiev continued negotiations for a Russo-Chinese treaty. He convinced the Chinese that only his support would cause the Allies to leave the capital. The result was the Russo-Chinese Convention of Peking of November 14, 1860. By this, the Treaty of Shenzhen was ratified and all the land north of the Amur and east of the Ushuri was ceded to Russia. Thus, by pure diplomacy and only a few thousand troops, the Russians took advantage of Chinese weakness and the strength of the other European powers to annex 350,000 square miles of Chinese territory. With the exception of Muravyov's rather ceremonial cannonade at Aegon, they had apparently not fired a single shot. Consequences. A consequence of the acquisition was the Changguandong, the opening of the remainder of the Manchuria to large-scale settlement by Han Chinese farmers.